worked with quadratic formula for. We're just going to add problems to it for tonight. Because there weren't that many, you might as well just put them all on one sheet of paper. A lot of people didn't use a lot of paper, so we're saving trees today. From what I understand, you guys have all worked with quadratic formula before. It hasn't been anything that's been horribly scary bad. With that being said, I want to make sure you guys are all with me on what it looks like. Thank you. So, sorry, I had to.
Hey, we're up here, Dash.
Word. So, the best way to talk about quadratic formula is to go right to the quadratic formula video.
Watch a parabola.
He said, "Sir, please help me. I don't understand, and I've been having troubles. This problem's all I fix." So I took out my notebook and I wiped away his tears with the quadratic formula. Quadratic formula. Quadratic formula. Quadratic formula, and it's negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac over 2a, over 2a, over 2a. So I watch him factor it, I attack the equation fast. Said I plug in the coefficients. Yep, you bet your ass me if I could explain it. This problem's down the drain. That's exactly when he stuck a knife into my brain. I exclaimed, "Why did you do this?
Listen.
Do you even care? Didn't I just help you? Didn't I complete your square?" No, actually, I used the quadratic formula. Quadratic formula. Quadratic formula. Quadratic formula. And it's negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac over 2a. Over 2a. Over 2a. But now my life is over. I've seen all that I can see. Quadratics, cubics, quintics, quartics got the best of me. But as I lay here dying, a strange peace comes over me, knowing that upon my tombstone carved for all the world to see will be the quadratic formula. Quadratic formula. Quadratic formula. Quadratic formula. And it's negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac over 2a, over 2a, over 2a. One more time. Quadratic formula. Quadratic formula. Let's bring it way down. Quadratic formula. Quadratic formula. And it's negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac over 2a, over 2a, over 2a, over 2a.
That was cool.
Isn't it awesome? Now, what's great about quadratic formula is that there's so many catchy and annoying, funny ways to remembering it and how it works. Like this.
Yeah.
Oh, I love the one.
Is this one good?
Oh, God.
Oh, God.
Willis.
X equals out to be plus or minus. Ruby squared minus 4AC. All over 2A. What do you say? X equals out to be plus or minus. Ruby squared minus 4AC. All over 2A. Taught by Mr. Bay. What a nice guy, what a scrappy guy, who teaches us algebra 2 haiku. What a great guy, Mr. Bald Guy, who gives us extra credit. Woo-hoo! X equals out to be plus or minus. Ruby squared minus 4AC. All over 2A. That's the chord for baby.
All right. Well, yes, that was Mike and Daddy's dad walking by eating guacamole as they're recording all of it. I guess if you were mixing it up, you want to eat guacamole. You know, that's what you do. With that being said, you guys. With that being said, I am letting you embark on your first project. You have 2 weeks to create your own song. This is optional. Okay? I make it worth your while. Yes. Yeah. I was telling the other class. When I was telling the other class, songs, obviously not what they were doing here, but come up with something creative, record it, throw it up on YouTube or send me the file. And I'll put it up on there. It'll be, what's that? Like with the video, people using their phones, video, whatever. Creativity. Make it fun. Have some fun with it. Try not to do more than 4 or 5 people in a group if you want to group it out. 2 Fridays from now would be October 3rd, I believe. Okay? That way you get a couple of weekends. Yes, ma'am?
Can we do it with people who are not in other states?
That's fine.
Okay.
That's fine. People have also asked if you can work with other people in the other class periods with this. That's fine, too. Like in this with Mike and Maddie and Hunter and Jack, they weren't all in the same class, but they all had, they're all in the same Alpha 2 honors class, but they're not in the same class period. So if you guys had other people in other classes you want to work together with, that's perfectly fine. Like I said, completely, totally optional. If you're an animation style person, you want to do the one where someone gets stabbed in the head. Obviously,
You can do that non-animated.
you can do that now.
Wait, was
Depends on the status.
the first one one of your students?
No. If you listen to, I think that's Jack White, not Jack White, Jack Black. Wait, Jack's, it's Jack White. It's not the White Stripes in this one. I think it was Jack Black. I think that was his voice doing like a parody or something like that for maybe like Schoolhouse Rock or whatever. The fact that somebody's getting stabbed in the head is just kind of over the top. There are tons and tons and tons of things out there. There are raps. There are like chorus line versions of it. Try to make it the more creative, the better you can be. School appropriate is nice. Yes.
Is there a time limit?
It shouldn't be more than 3 minutes tops. I think the first one we watched was kind of long. You know, that was kind of 3.5 minutes or so. Yes, ma'am? It's worth your while. It really depends upon how the production value and everything is and all that. I mean, if you stand up there and just go, X equals negative B plus or minus square root B squared minus 4AC. Over 2. If you do that, it's just kind of, that's just kind of boring. They had dance moves. Come on, they're just.
Yeah, you came off into the patio.
Yeah, exactly. Right. So, yes, ma'am.
What's the most points you ever given out?
Hey,
Why-
I
just
honestly
accept the fact
don't.
that's extra credit.
Right.
Yo, we have to know how many points.
No, you don't.
Do it.
Any extra credit is good, so.
So
Well, it was
I do this every year. I think it's a lot of fun. I leave it up to you guys to come up with whatever you want. But like I said, any file that you can do, if you need to have me throw, it's easier to have it on a YouTube, so I can put it on our YouTube channel. I don't have to make it public. I can make it just so that I can watch it and just put it in the notes. Whatever you do, you will present it. You don't have to present it live. You just can say, "Here's my video," and press play, and that we'll call that a day. But we're all going to watch it together. So we can all laugh at you, because that's what we do. Okay? Questions? When does it do?
October 3rd, the day.
2 Fridays.
Is it okay if I do terrible one-hit wonders?
That's fine. That's fine. I haven't seen one done by terrible one-hit wonders yet.
It's whatever.
I haven't heard one like that. So, there's been the Christmas Carol styles. There's been a couple of rap ones. This one with the dance moves. There really hasn't been anything else. So, I know there's a lot of band people. I hope that are creative. So, let's just talk real quick. Let's talk about the quadratic formula. Today isn't going to take very long to go through. Remember, your generic form, this is 5-6 stuff, so. What the quadratic formula is doing is that it's solving to find your zeros. The quadratic formula finds your zeros off of anything. Just like when you use completing the square, that's. Sorry, there's like a dead spot right there. The quadratic formula finds zeros relatively quickly. It's just like you guys were doing last night with the completing the square stuff. It just takes that extra second to do it, to do these. Now, quadratic formula, all you're doing is plucking coefficients. Remember, it's the opposite. X equals negative b plus or minus squared. Help me out here. B squared minus 4ac all over 2a. Anyway, so just don't put all of your calculator at once and you're going to be fine. All right. The new part of this that I want to tell you about that you probably remember a little bit of is what's called the discriminant. The discriminant is the junk underneath the radical. The discriminant is the b squared minus 4ac. And you probably saw this in Algebra 1 where if the discriminant was equal to 0, or if the discriminant was greater than 0, or if the discriminant was less than 0. Do you vaguely remember that?
Yes.
sort of.
All right. Back in Algebra 1 that you had, if it was equal to 0, you had one real answer. If it was greater than 0, you had 2. If it was less than 0, you had no solution. Well, now if it's less than 0, what are the solutions? Odd, yeah, they're imaginary, okay? Because you take the negative square roots. So the discriminant tells you the type and how many solutions you may have. It tells type and how many solutions. Okay? So, if b, like I said, if b squared minus 4ac is equal to 0, you have one real. If it's greater than 0, you have two real. If it's less than 0, you have two imaginary. Okay. It's something you would have recognized when you would have multiplied it out anyway. Okay. Like I said, the biggest mistake people make with quadratic formula stuff is you go too fast and you try to pull up coefficients and you forget a sign. That's usually where people screw up. You'll simplify your radicals like you would normally. One of the times that I would say that using the quadratic formula versus using completing the square is if your middle term is, if your b value is odd. If you're completing the square and your b value is even, it's really fast. But if that middle term, that b value was odd, you got all those fractions, that's when I would use quadratic formula versus completing the square. Okay? Does that make sense? Yes, sir.
So on the test, will you say you have to use quadratic formula or completing the square?
What'll happen on the test is that, one other quick example I wanted to show you guys. Remember we didn't do a complete the square with a leading term coefficient? I'm going to show one of those before I let you loose on all the work here. Is I will say on the test or quiz, use complete the square, or use quadratic formula, or then I'll say use factoring, or I'll say use any means possible, which means it's open to whatever you want. Okay? I'll probably do one of each of them and then have some that you can do whatever you want with. You know what I mean? Yes, sir.
You said use the quadratic formula.
To be honest with you, you can use it whenever you want, but I think that completing the square is quicker because you don't get lost with some of those sign values, like some of the signs might get screwed up with in this.
What do you mean?
I would definitely use the quadratic formula if the b value is an odd number and you can't factor it. You'll see them if you do a couple of them. You see what I mean by picking it up on that. Let me show you one real fast of the, what do you call it, the complete the square that had a leading term coefficient not equal to 1. Then I'm going to give you guys some problems. Okay? We're going to cut this a little short today. Let's see here. So let's say we had this. And I wanted to solve that via completing the square. The only rule for solving that when you're completing the square, if your leading term coefficient is not equal to 1, is to just divide everything by the leading term coefficient. Sometimes you'll get, sometimes it works out where it's the GCF and it works out cleanly. Sometimes it might get a fractional amount. In this case here, if I divide everything by -3, I'm doing it to both sides. We get x squared minus 8x plus 9. Everybody okay with that?
Yes.
Now, if I wanted to factor this, I'd say, okay, what times what's positive 9, but I add together to get -8? I can't. You see that? It won't work.
Just say it.
Hit again. What times what was positive 9, but you add together to get -8? It won't work. Okay. So in this case, I would probably not, even if it was one of those that said, hey, use whatever you want, I would probably complete the square here because this middle term is even. It's a little bit quicker. So we move the 9. What's half of -8? -4, so there's my term. So it's x minus 4. When I square it, I get 16. So I'm going to add 16 to both sides. And this becomes so then I take the square root of it, and you wind up with x will equal 4 plus or minus the square root of 7. That's what's nice about completing the square. It's really fast when your middle term is even. Okay? It's very, very fast. Quadratic formula, on the other hand, you get the same exact result if I'm working with this. It just takes a little longer to go through. Opposite of b plus or minus square root b squared. B squared minus 4 times a times, wow. All over 2a, up 2a. Sorry.
What was the first song called? Was it like what was it called?
It's just a quadratic formula song.
I can look it up.
Now, when you see this, do you see what I'm saying by if I use quadratic formula on that, it just takes a while. But completing the square is very efficient. Okay. You get the same answer. It just takes a little bit longer to go through. Questions? What I want you guys to work on tonight is section, is it 5.6? I forgot the page number. It's 296. It's not 5.9, sorry, it's 6. I gave you 10 problems that have solved by any means you want. Totally up to you which version works, whatever you want to work. The last 3 are working with discriminant. What's the discriminant? How many solutions are you going to get? That's really all it is. Solutions and type. So you just find out what b squared minus 4ac. If it's positive, you know you have 2 real. If it's 0, you have 1 real. If it's negative, you have 2 imaginary. That's all it is. I'm giving you a good 20-minute head start on this. You should get more than half of it done.
Can you play?
What's that?
Yeah, can you
Count it on the board, yeah.